ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blur Without Fear. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we have a very special guest. Someone who you might already be familiar, I would assume you're already familiar with if you're at least as old as I am. The creator, producer, writer, director, probably a laundry list of other accolades in this particular one of Darkwing Duck. And you also had a hand in producing and kind of, I guess, helping usher in stuff like Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, as well as one of my personal favorites. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but The Adventures of the Gummy Bears.
Oh yeah, I did the third season of that.
Yeah. That's it. I was saying it was near and dear to my heart. I don't know about anybody else, but I loved it. And then of course, you had a hand on stuff like Generator Rex and the Hercules series, the Aladdin series, as well as the sequels and stuff like that. Welcome to the channel. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. You made me sound really good and important, so that's good. Yeah, as far as all the hats I've worn, I always, as a producer, feel my job is to hire people way more talented than me in all these individual roles, and I know just enough about each spot to be dangerous, but I can give notes. I remember with this was actually a later production. It was on one of the Hellboy movies that I did. And the director was saying, we were thinking of making this sequence. It was with a werewolf. And he said, because there's a fireplace, we'd like to go really red with it. I said, oh, I'm fine with that. And I would look at what the background painter did. I said, oh, no, if you're going to do it, do it. I mean, go farther. And I knew Photoshop he used all the time. So I was able, he's the talent, but I could say, no, push it red. And then finally I said, push it all the way to the right. And they did that. And they were saying, obviously, that's not good. I said, okay, now pull it back. And they stopped at a place. Okay, that looks really good. And they realized they were way past what they thought they were red. And, it was just a little trick. It's like you have to forget what you've done, make it crazy looking, and then slowly pull back. So it's little stuff like that, here and there. I often did like real rough character design ideas, but I had guys like Greg Guler and Kenny Tompkins and Toby Shelton who did way more than that. There was only, I think, the one character. In fact, I have a toy hanging up of it in Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. I did a vampire robot called Nose 4A2, and that, not only did I design that, I color keyed it. And they did a toy. I was thinking as I did it, because he ends in a point. He said, well, this one will never be a toy because they can't stand it up. They did him as a toy, and they just did a little plastic, knob that you stuck the point into. So I said, well, okay, that's fine. That's the only time I really went from beginning to end on something and got merchandise out of it. So.
Well,
when I moved over to Disney TV animation, I was like at the first meeting about it, but then I went back to whatever I was doing, trying to figure out what I was supposed to be doing at Disney. And then ended up going there about 8-9 months into the first year. And technically I was management in that I was the creative manager, and they were doing the Wuzzles and Gummy Bears. And then, and they were just getting episodes back. But then, the third season, the network wanted to make the change. Jim Megan, Art Vitello created the show and had done 2 seasons of it. And then Alan Zaslov, who ended up being my partner on many shows, was the experienced guy. And then I was the co-producer on that show. Although I didn't get named a co-producer until the end of the show. And I said, I would have given different notes if I was a co-producer. Jeez. But
so
again, because I was
here. Wait a minute.
Because I was an artist and a writer, I would always, all the storyboards ended up going through me, so I could chuck story things, but I'd also add gags, whatever, ask them to push expressions. More so on the later shows than the Gummy Bears, because that was really up and running. And what I did there was kind of rewrote the Bible to just expand what was already there. I said, let's take this kingdom of Dunwind and put it on a trade route. You know, it was a minor thing that
Mhm.
the audience wouldn't know, but it's an excuse to bring other characters in from foreign lands and open that up. And
Okay.
then, yeah, and Rich Vogel and Mark Seidenberg took it on from there when it went to, they needed extra episodes to make it part of the Disney afternoon. So
Mhm.
they basically used that Bible to expand things and go on and on. But then, yeah, Chip and Dale was my first show, and then Darkwing, and that was just, we weren't sure what we were doing. All I know is we did it really fast without a lot of time and not enough story editors. And
Oh
so Darkwing
no.
was really, yeah, Darkwing was really, you know, my show, and it ended up being, well, me drawing from the comics that I initially grew up with before the
Mhm.
Marvel age. When I was real little, it was the Silver Age of comics, and everything was crazy on the cover and very light continuity
Mhm.
of, you know, yes, Clark Kent is Superman. Lois kind of suspects he might be
Yeah.
for some reason, you know, and this, of everybody in the world, maybe this guy in the next office might be, you know. Jimmy Olsen was a pal. They worked for Perry White. Lex Luthor was pissed off because he had lost his hair in an explosion when he was a teenager, and kryptonite hurt him, you
Like
know.
that was
And
all we knew.
then that, yeah, that's all you needed. So you pick up any comic, and eventually it contained enough information to enjoy the story,
Mhm.
um, which is, you know, for me, it had a heavy influence on Darkwing because everybody else was talking continuity, and I said there is no continuity. You know, when they talk about the origin of a Darkwing, they say, "Oh yeah, he went to high school with Megavolt." I said, "No, that's just because you really like that episode." You know,
Right.
what about the one where he was rocketed to Earth? You know, with it from his parents on another planet. Um, so we just had fun playing with
Mhm.
the, you know, the comic tropes, and
Mhm.
I'm sure I drove fans crazy. But what's fascinating, of course, is watching fans trying to weave a continuity over things. Um, so, and but the to me, it was all about the entertainment, and a
Mhm.
big example of that was Negaduck.
Yeah.
He started an episode where he was split into two, of Negaduck and Aposaduck, and we weren't sure Jim Cummings could differentiate his voice enough, and would overseas mix up these two identical looking characters, you know, on a storyboard. And turned out he did great. And there's only like, I don't know, 3 scenes where they messed up overseas.
Mhm.
Um, and at the end of that, I said, God, this is a great character. He's a great foil. Let's bring him back. And all the story editors said, well, how do we do that? That's just, we split him apart too, so it's always going to be Posiduck. I said, no, nobody likes Posiduck. Just bring him back. And they asked, and this was my attitude. They
Mhm.
asked, well, how do we explain that? And my answer was, you don't.
Yeah, just do it.
Nobody ever. Again, the comics I grew up with, nobody explained how the Joker was always available to rob a bank, or the Riddler. Didn't he
Yeah.
get captured? And like, it didn't matter. You know, you just went and you were reading for the story. So that's how we approached Darkwing.
Well, that was something I always thought was kind of cool about you know, Darkwing Duck. 'Cause I know a lot of people like to make they like to make the, I guess, like the Batman comparison, you know, regular guy who's out superhero, but like the thing that always kind of stuck out to me, like he always reminded me so much of the Shadow, like
Yeah,
just
there's
like
a lot.
in
I mean, there's a lot
presentation,
of
yeah,
shadow in him. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, Darkwing.
Mhm.
Darkwing started out. His origin story, as far as being created,
Yeah.
is real clear because Jeffrey Katzenberg was, you know, I forget, he was a president at Disney. I mean, he was in charge of all live action production and animation. He knew there was an episode of DuckTales called Double O Ducks, and
Mhm.
they always felt, they meaning Jeffrey and Michael Eisner, they always felt like if you had an intriguing name, or their definition of intriguing anyway, that would bring a little more audience to you to check it out, and then it's
Mhm.
up to you to keep that audience. So he liked the name Double O Ducks, and the episode featured Launchpad McQuack, but the specific orders were no, it's not. The whole point is to create a new character.
Mhm.
You know, it's not Launchpad, so it has nothing to do with the episode other than the name. So we went ahead, and my first pitch flopped because it was just a spy parody. And Jeffrey said, no, this needs more heart. And it wasn't until we added Goslyn, the idea that, a little girl refused, who's crazy and adventurous, refuses to stay at home, that it really, okay, now we've got something going. But the nice thing back then is our staff of story editors and staff writers at Disney had term contracts. In other words, when they signed to be on staff, it's like you're signed for 2 years with an option for 2 more, or whatever the deal was. And all the terms of your future raises would be part of that contract. As opposed to now, people are signed on for a show, and the show ends and you're gone. So toward the end of the show, you're always hoping to get the next project going. Anyway, because of that, I could invite people into a conference room and just brainstorm, or say, here's something I'm working through, and just trade ideas. And Dwayne Capizzi was the guy who did the Alf animated show, and then went on to do Jackie Chan Adventures and Men in Black, and he does some Transformers stuff right now. Anyway, he looked at the early art, which was just a generic Disney duck with in a white tuxedo with a mask, a small hat, and a cape. And he said, looking at this guy, he's more like a pulp hero, and he said the Shadow and Green Hornet. And that was my, inspirational moment, because that clicked. I love that stuff. I mean, it was before my time, but comic collecting, comic fandom, back in the 60s and 70s really overlapped with science fiction fandom and old radio drama and pulp magazine. They were all at the same conventions or whatever.
Right.
And that gave a different template for our spies. So instead of worrying about Q and Moneypenny and all that, it's like, Doc Savage used to have all these quirky guys. He had a chemical engineer and engineer, communications guy, and all, and they had different personalities to rocket or to bounce off each other. So we played around with that, and Launchpad was always there in the background, and as just, he was a popular character in DuckTales. It was like, hey, it's like having a guest star or a character actor that's popular. Can Fonzie be in this episode? Anyway, the problem was we came up with all these great characters, but there were too many for a half-hour show, because you figure you're always going to be maybe saving someone, or at least involved with somebody who gets you in. So that's a character. And then you're going to have a villain. The villain may have, henchmen, just number of bodies on the screen to give them each something to say. Or all these guys were based at the home base. When do you get to go on the adventure? There's all these guys. So we just pared it down until, Goslyn is the one that makes the show work,
Yeah.
And then Launchpad, it was like, again, going back to Silver Age, there was the Bat plane, the Bat copter, the Bat boat, the Bat, whatever. I just see Batman at the trademark office, saying like, no, I got to register this. Really? You're going to do a Bat boomerang?
Yeah,
really?
right.
Well, Batarang, excuse me. Oh, yeah, of course.
I mean, if you can get shark repellent, I mean, you can get anything through. You can get anything through at that point.
Yeah. Anyway, so cutting it down to that, and having, it was like, I wanted, and one of the reasons why St. Canard has this big river around it is, it's got to have a bat boat. And so I decided on the kind of a Judge Dredd like motorcycle, but of course had to have a duck face because Batman always had a bat. And then the idea of a plane that immediately suggested Launchpad. So that brought Launchpad. It's like, okay, that's the guy we're going to keep. And then we actually, the motorcycle was the Rat Catcher, the plane was the Thunderquack, and the boat was, I want to say it was the Wave Shredder. It's like the least inspirational name. And we ended up, I'm not even sure we ever did it in an episode. So anyway, it's a lot of it is Batman, but the shadow stuff from that initial thing, Dwayne said, well, that gave me the weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men in the shadow? So originally, Darkwing was only going to say one thing, which I've since forgotten. It's like, I'm the terror that flaps in the night. I am the that pecks at your nightmares. I am Darkwing Duck. And luckily, I want to say it was like the third script in, maybe fourth. I mean, we had obviously a lot of stories going on at one time. So
right, because it was 60
they weren't literally
episodes,
coming
right?
through. Yeah, it ended up being 90 episodes because we did 65 plus 2 seasons on ABC. Anyway, luckily a script came up. I think it was Double Darkwings or something. It was Launchpad McQuack for some reason had to masquerade as Darkwing Duck, and the gag the guys did was that he couldn't get the weed of crime bears bitter fruit stuff out, and he was going, I am the road salt that rots the underside of your car. I am the bubble gum that sticks to the shoe of crime. We felt that was hilarious. And again, my feeling is, you've got a good idea, you don't run away from it. I said, that is too good to just give to this one episode. Let's give that to Darkwing. And everybody rewrote any script that was already in work. They rewrote it to include that. And that obviously became, one of the most fun aspects of the show. That and Let's Get Dangerous. I said, it's his slogan. He needs to say it in every episode. And that was before it was my idea, that the songwriters put it into the theme song. But I think it's in every episode except for 2 or 3. So,
oh wow,
that's
actually
mission
impressive.
Accomplished. I mean, it's just one of those things where if you're going to do whether it's Star Trek saying, I mean, Star Trek became a thing about what each captain is going to say, whether it's engage or take us out or
make it so,
let's fly. Anyway, so that spawned a dozen T-shirts. What can I say? So.
Well, I mean, it was something that for me, what made it so different was just that, because full disclosure, I think when Darkwing Duck came out, which was like, it was like 91. Was it 91? Yeah. So in 91, I was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 or 10 years old. And I just remember the first time I saw it, I mean, and being a kid, like I was already like, really heavily into comics and stuff like that. And when I first saw it, that was kind of that thing that was like kind of fresh in my head, was, my mom and dad used to always talk to me about the Shadow. And when I saw
well, you had cool parents. Yeah.
Like
my parents never talked about the Shadow.
But I had a really weird childhood. So like whenever I would stay with my dad, like he had like old, like kind of, he had like old like Shadow stuff, and like he would always talk to me about like, oh, this, and my mom,
and the Shadow had a penthouse just like I do in this gargoyle outside. Sometimes I sit on that, look out over my city.
Well, because like he was just so cool. Because like you think about like it's like, oh, he's got the coat, he's got the hat, he's got the the kind of scarf, he's got faces covered, like,
and the nose.
Crazy. Yeah, he's got the crazy nose. And I was like, it was just something that like as a kid, like you like, that's cool. And so when I first saw Darkwing Duck, that was kind of like one of the first things that kind of stuck out to me. And I was like, and not only that, the music, the lines, but also, and of course, you had DuckTales where you had like the kids, getting involved in like all the wacky shenanigans. But as far as like superhero stuff goes, at that age, I wasn't used to seeing characters like, a Darkwing Duck whose child is like getting involved in all of the like wacky zany shenanigans. I mean, Batman has Robin, but like that's different. When Goslyn would get involved, it was
when
just
Robin
like,
came out. Robin made no sense. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm fighting crime. You know what
Right.
I need? I need a 7-year-old dressed in
Yeah.
bright colors to come with me.
Child
'Cause that
endangerment. That's how you fight crime.
pretty much, yes. So yeah, and Goslyn, it was like she wasn't supposed to come along. That was the whole
Right.
thing. That's the last thing he wanted, you know.
Hmm.
You know, if he wasn't so cheap, he would have hired a babysitter
Yeah.
to at least kept her there. I mean, that's almost a logical running character to have. But,
Yeah.
you know, the equivalent of Alfred, and just,
Mhm.
you know, the keeper of the lock to the chains that keep her in the house. But no, I mean, that was, again, I love Calvin and Hobbes. And I
Mhm.
said, what if we had Calvin, if that brought a personality? And the one thing I said was, but to make this work, because they're going to drive each other crazy and be very broad with them, they love each other. Make
Mhm.
sure they touch, make sure they hug each other, you know, and, you know, that really made a difference. And I didn't realize how much of a difference until I retired, and I was invited as a guest to, I think, MomoCon in Atlanta.
Mhm.
Um, and I had these two women come up separately and saying how much it meant to them, because they had a real rough childhood because of various father issues.
Mhm.
And that relationship was an anchor. And a
Mhm.
third person the next day came up, and I told her that story, and she went, "Oh, that's why." You know, it was like, I didn't realize that, you know, just that in the middle of a crazy, wacky show, showing some sincere emotion would make such a difference. And we
Mhm.
played on, you know, that with, and this came from some Batman thing, I'm sure, but we did a time travel thing where Goslin ends up in the time top and taken to the future, and she gets to see what Darkwing would have turned into if he didn't have Goslin in his life, that he
Mhm.
just became this Law and Order Judge Dredd type Dark Warrior Duck. And the world was a terrible place. So it was, you know,
Instead of
that kind
Saint
of stuff was
Canard, you got
just
Saint
fun.
Gotham.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like, that's the kind of stuff that you couldn't pull off unless you had built a relationship in the series, you know,
Mhm.
that it's not, if you imagine Bart Simpson going in the future and seeing how Homer would have turned out, I'm sure it'd be a hilarious show, but you
Oh yeah.
wouldn't have that actual sentiment, you know, at the core of it. Yeah, we
Yeah. Yeah.
stumbled into a lot of stuff that turned out to be pretty good.
Well, I mean, I've always kind of been of the belief that sometimes some of the greatest creations and innovations, and especially in storytelling, usually do sometimes kind of seem to happen like by pure chance. So like,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of getting the inside baseball on this, I'm kind of like, actually that's pretty cool. Like, it actually makes, like, and I guess to take it a step further, I actually had a conversation about this, was maybe a few months ago, or maybe less than that, with Amanda Dybert, who was writing
Oh,
the
yeah.
Darkwing Duck series at Dynamite, and there was something she said that kind of stuck in the back of my head and just kind of set off a light bulb. One of my favorite characters on Darkwing Duck, and I don't know why, I couldn't tell you why, was Liquidator. And she said that Liquidator was one of the hardest characters to write because all of his stuff is like catchphrases, like commercial phrases and stuff like that. So like, what was it like? How hard was it for you all to write for
Oh, I
Liquidator?
gotta say, Liquidator, for that very reason, was not one of my most popular villains, and he's
Yeah.
incredibly popular. So it was the story editors had a knack for him. I think actually Dwayne Capizzi was one of the story editors who did a great job of finding the ad slogans type thing to
Mhm.
play into his humor and all that. And I wasn't enamored of him because I said he doesn't have a real personality. He has this
Right.
fake phony thing, but it's a gimmick, so he's kind
Mhm.
of two-dimensional. But those guys loved writing him, and of course, in the Fearsome Five, he could play off the other ones, and that was great. No, my favorite villains were actually Megavolt and Bushroot
Mhm.
because I felt there was more depth to them. I mean, Megavolt was just, obviously he was short-circuited in many ways. And Dan
Yeah.
Castellaneta, though, would do hilarious stuff with his voice. And then Bushroot, it was just like, hit that poor guy, he was trying to impress a girl. He ended up turning into a plant, and then he tried to create basically a Bride of Frankenstein. He ended up with a vampire potato, and but the fun of him, and we could saw him into bits, and he could grow back. So that was it. The Liquidator, by the way, people have said, because obviously we're playing with Silver Age type characters, and people say, "Oh, well, Bushroot is based on Poison Ivy," and it's like, no, he's actually based on. Back in the early days of Marvel, there was a spin-off magazine from Fantastic Four, that Strange Tales, which featured the Human Torch and Steve Ditko's Doctor Strange, and there was 2 issues. One where it was Human Torch versus the Plant Man. And Plant Man originally was where I originally saw things where although used to be in old cartoons and the Wizard of Oz, when you think of it, the trees could throw things, or the cactus plant could like shoot needles out, or something could grow to capture somebody. So I got that from Plant Man. Strangely enough, when he first appeared, he had a huge Darkwing type hat and a cape. But when he returned, he had this silly plant outfit that was all green and giant leaves. But that came from him, and then little bits, specifically the Eternal side of him, came from Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. The idea that a pollen is little bits of him, and that made Bushroot perfect to kill and wrap in plastic for our Twin Beaks episode. But those guys had more personality. So Liquidator I never tried to write him because I did not have the knack of that. So yes, he is hard to do. I'll tell you what Amanda Dibert did a fantastic job on is Morgana Macabre.
Yes.
Fans have a huge love of the episodes, a 2-parter called Justice Ducks, where we did our, which is an incredible comic series now, our Justice League type.
Yeah.
But what I don't like about the episode is that Morgana specifically was just unsure of herself, was like a weaker character, which gave her an arc. She ended up, in better shape. But in her individual episodes, there was more of a, well, yeah, she is a villain too. It was more of a Catwoman to Batman thing, and I think she really nailed Morgana to the extent that I really hope Dynamite would put out like a 6-inch, if not a separate series, at least a 6-issue kind of Morgana thing. In fact, somebody asked me in the interviews I've been doing, are there, what do you think of the Justice Ducks? And I think Roger Langridge has done a fantastic job. It's probably my favorite book of the 3 that they publish, in that it feels like an old Donald Duck, Uncle Scrooge comic. He gets into the adventure at a crazy speed. Something's always going on. He's really dealing with the personalities, the changes he made with like Neptunia being the natural leader of the group, solves the Aquaman problem of what happens if you have a mission that has no lakes or oceans around. Anyway, I think the person was saying, "Whoa, could you see them doing spin-off books?" Or he talked about Origins, and I said, I'm not huge on Origins, but when you think of doing a Morgana 6 episodes or 6 issues, really a supernatural tale, and just you've got some Dr. Fate and Dr. Strange and Phantom Stranger and all these other conceits through the years that in addition to the vampires and zombies and all that, you could really do a fun, huge story that is this supernatural, still funny, but a whole different venue. And Neptunia could have an undersea adventure that could be anything from Davy Jones to Ghost Pirates to create new villains for her to deal with undersea. It doesn't have to be up on the surface. So each of those books could be a unique, different thing that again, in the future, they could collect them all together. I mean, obviously any 6 issues could be collected, but I just think that would be fantastic. And Amanda, again, part of that came from Amanda's work on Morgana.
Well, yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's when I was speaking with her, that was actually one of the things that uh about her run on Darkwing that really stuck out to me, was that like the way she tackled the relationship between Morgana and DW, and you know, how they played off of each other, the way she I was like wow, I was like it actually made me wonder like why hasn't a Morgana spinoff series been greenlit yet. But I guess
Hey, I was surprised with Dynamite Comics. Obviously, they got the license to Darkwing,
mhm,
and I'm just, I wasn't talking to them at the time,
mhm.
but suddenly it's like, wait, there's a Negaduck series, so I
Yeah.
subscribed to that to get Jeff Parker's Negaduck, and then the Justice Ducks. I actually put off getting those. I have a pet peeve, generally, about giving Disney money for creations I made. I
Yeah.
mean, everything I did, they own. But
Yeah.
I did break down. I bought a Negaduck Funko Pop when I was in Saskatoon at a convention. It was like a really good price. I said, "Well, I'm going to buy that," but I had to. I couldn't resist the new comics, so I bought the first couple physical issues of
Mhm.
Darkwing, and then a couple of digital ones. And again, the Negaduck series I signed up for, and that was very interesting in that uh, Jeff put more Darkwing into Negaduck, because
Mhm.
we played Negaduck pretty much one note, and that was the gag, was he's just evil. Given a choice, he's always going to choose the chainsaw. Um,
Right.
you know, um, but with Justice Ducks, I hadn't gotten any until you know I said, yeah, let's do some interviews to help the Kickstarter. And I
Mhm.
said, it would be good if I read a little more of these comics. And so they sent me like the first 6 issues or whatever digitally of Justice Ducks. And I loved it. I love what Roger was doing. And it's like, all right, you can send me the rest. Either that or I'm going to have to wait for these collections. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the you know, the world, the world that you've kind of put forth, I mean, it's an awesome playground, and it made me very pleased that somebody was doing something with it, to keep it out
Yeah.
there. That said, because well, for one, we do have, is by my count, the Kickstarter that is going currently, it is to reprint the original Darkwing Duck comics that were coming out kind of like about in and around the time of the animated series, kind of in and after
Yeah, I'll
the
tell you
first.
that. I'll tell you
Yeah.
this: when in looking at what they're collecting in the thing,
Mhm.
I didn't know the Marvel run even existed.
Yeah.
The 10 issues of Marvel stuff,
Hmm.
because I at that time I was deep in Agrabah and Genie and Aladdin and Boo,
Yeah.
Iago. So I wasn't aware of any of that at all, and they didn't send me
Mhm.
any comics. Generally, while I was doing the show, I made a deal with licensing. I said, look, I'll go to as many meetings as you want, but I want one of whatever somebody produces. And that
Mhm.
was great. I got a bunch of toys. Um,
It's actually a pretty sweet
but
little
they,
deal.
but it, yeah, it would have been, but I guess moving on to Aladdin, they didn't carry on. Otherwise, I would have gotten copies of those comics. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm shocked to find out, in doing just a touch of research, that 3 of those issues have Darkwing, Goslin, and Launchpad living in a human world. It was like,
Yeah.
the cartoon actually exists. You could watch a couple episodes, but
Yeah.
there were a couple episodes where we put them in a human world,
Mhm.
but those are special things, and it's like maybe those are the only ones that they watch. I mean, one of my favorites is one where Darkwing goes into the comic publisher to complain about how he's being portrayed in comics, and you know, and I love breaking the story conceits, and jumping from a story Darkwing is writing to the adventure he is actually writing, and then when
Mhm.
somebody else takes over, the adventure changes, and you put a coffee mug down on the artwork, and suddenly they're running into a giant coffee mug. I mean, that was one of my favorites. So anyway, that
Yeah.
had a human, or was it a pig editor? Come to think of it, I don't
I
know.
don't
We
I
did at least have one episode where
Yeah.
I was portrayed as a giant bald guy, putting out, merchandising Darkwing in another alternate universe, which came from an old Silver Age story of who was the writer of Green Lantern? I'm blanking on my comic history. Anyway, no, it was the Flash, and he was saying that he dreamed some of his stories, and the Flash in the original Flash, the guy with
Jay Garrick, yeah,
Mercury helmet, yeah, and just that turned into the Flash of Two Worlds, I think it's called,
yeah,
and where it was the first time in DC that a modern creation who was a reboot, went back and met the original, which led to the Justice Society, which led to alternate DC universes. The nice thing when we started Darkwing, the internet was only text-based.
Yes.
I was early on, there were no pictures. There's certainly nothing streaming.
No.
So I couldn't call up all these covers I half remembered. There was no easy way to look at old comic stories, which I think ended up being a good thing, because if I could access that, I'd probably say, well, I can't do this story because it would just be plagiarism, to do this. But when I half remember a story, and especially with DC, like when they did a super evolved, that classic giant light bulb head, when somebody evolved into the human of the future. They did that story with Superman, with Lois, I believe with Batman. I know they did it with Flash, so it's like, I was just, yeah, we'll do that story in my universe. But anyway, that same, that idea of, I'm dreaming of this other universe is, that's what got me into thinking of, and generally I would come up with an idea and pitch it to my story editors, or we'd talk. I mean, they would certainly pitch me stories mostly, but or they'd come into a room, we'd say, well, I don't like that story, but what if we did this and this, and we'd come up with something different. But no, that, especially those old Flash covers, stuck with me. And the reason why Negaduck is yellow, black, and red is those are the colors of Professor Zoom, the evil Flash. So it's
I never thought about
my
that.
mind, in my little kid's mind, it was like, what are the colors of villainy? Well, it's yellow, red, and black. That's what it is.
You've changed my perspective on Negaduck.
There you go.
Just because it's one of those things. I mean, yeah, when you say it out loud, it makes perfect sense. But it was never anything. I had never put the two and two together on that. That's actually
that's the ideal thing.
Yeah.
That's the ideal thing, is that you don't know
right
where it's from, so you're saying, oh, I know where this is going. It's like if you watch enough Twilight Zone episodes, you always start guessing the twist, kind of thing. Well, I can tell you, one of the last conventions I did before the pandemic was basically Russia Comic Con. It was in Moscow, their version of San Diego, basically. And I had this huge line coming up my table because, as I was told, when the Iron Curtain fell, DuckTales, Chip and Dale, Darkwing, and I think Ninja Turtles, among others, were like the first animated cartoon series that they had. That the animation that existed before then tended to be folk tales. They were very limited animation. It was all about the writing. And so suddenly, basically every kid of that generation saw our cartoons. And Darkwing was known as the Black Cloak. And the reason why is because if you translate Darkwing into Russian, there's way more syllables than his mouth would move when he says, let's get dangerous, or I'm Darkwing Duck. Anyway, they said to me once, they said, Tad, when we watched this, we didn't know it was a parody. And it was like, of course, they didn't have superhero comics or superhero shows or movies or any of that. They didn't have the Twilight Zone. So all the stuff I was playing with, I got credit for all the straight stuff that we were parodying, because, so it was kind of like, he's so brilliant. He comes up with these fantastic ideas, So that was a shock to me. Glad it worked in our
Yeah.
favor, but that was fantastic, you know.
Well,
So it's better to half remember something and inspire you
yeah.
to do something.
Well, I think it's actually kind of funny you bring that up because I remember, this is why I always tell people sometimes I don't like to read the comments because it just depresses me. But
A lesson we should all take. Yes.
yeah, but
Doesn't matter how many good ones you get. There's the one guy. I'm a jerk.
oh no,
Oh, I'm a jerk now.
there's always the one. There's always the one. It's never not. But like when I was talking to Amanda about her Darkwing Duck run, and I would kept when I would go back to see people who would comment on the interview. There were all these people. Not I say all these people. It's probably more like 5 or 6 people, but still it was an alarming number of people to me. That they're like, oh, Darkwing Duck. Darkwing Duck is so lame, and I'm like, well, like why? And they're like, oh, he just can't do anything right. And I was like, y'all know this is like not meant to be like serious, right? Like I was like,
it's a comedy.
It's a comedy. Like it's not meant. I was like,
a couple of channel clicks over, you'll get to the animated Batman.
Yeah,
that's what you're thinking of.
Yeah. Well, and I think because correct me if I'm wrong. If I remember right, I think Batman the animated series was kind of or on or about to come out somewhere in and around that time. That
It was afterwards. Actually,
yeah.
Remember, Darkwing started as 00 Duck.
That's right.
And then we were told we couldn't use that name because there's no such thing as the 00 agents in the British Secret Service. That was Ian Fleming creation. And the Cubby Broccoli was the name of the producer who was doing all the movies, and they were trying to re-energize him at the time.
Mm.
And even though, much like DuckTales, every cartoon show or sure Gilligan's Island or whatever would do their quote James Bond episode where they would parody all the typical stuff. And I think they just let that slide. But when suddenly they open up the Hollywood trade and there's a 2-page spread in Variety about 00 Duck with this duck in a cape and a mask and swinging through on a rope, it was like, no, that's going to hurt.
It hurt the
people
brand.
Taking Bond seriously when we're trying to kind of reinvent him. So we couldn't use that name. And, you're working long enough in a thing and it's like suddenly you're told to come up with something different. I had nothing in my brain. So my boss, amazingly, in $1990, said, we'll do a contest. The winner gets $500 and, you come up with a name for Darkwing Duck. And so every alliterative name, Deadshot Duck, Dead-Eyed Duck, Dangerous Dan the Duck, whatever. And finally, Alan Burnett worked at Disney at the time, and it's like, I was not thinking Nightwing. He said Darkwing. And I said, that's it. I said, but that's the character he thinks he is in his head. I'm going to put Duck on it because that makes it silly, which is closer to who he really is. So he actually did some development of possible Darkwing movies, and then left and went to Warner's to work on Batman the Animated Series. In fact, then he stayed at Warner's overseeing all the superhero things until he retired. So our running gag is that, Alan Burnett, we warmed him up for the Dark Knight with the Duck Knight. So that was it. So there was a tie right there at the beginning.
It's kind of funny how all that stuff works out. Like it's like, okay, well, it's like everything is like, just a doorway into the next thing, and the job you're doing here is preparing for the job you're going to be doing later. Like it's kind of wild how that works out.
And in animation, there's no, companies aren't happy with each other necessarily, but the writers and artists are going back and forth. It's where the job is. And Disney, again, only did this early on, would actually put some of their artists under contract too, because their idea was, let's get the guys we think are really good and sign them up, which is great for those guys because they didn't have to worry when a show was coming to an end, they would get reassigned to another show. We had to worry as producers because we knew as we got to the end, our best guys are going to be cherry picked out to start, whatever the next show is. So just like we plundered tailspin, the crew for, Darkwing, then we got plundered for, I forget who came next.
I mean, now the thing that I'm curious about is when we had like an announcement. I think it was like in 2022. I think that there was going to be like I guess like a revival of the Darkwing Duck animated series, like a reboot or something along those lines.
Yeah, they're developing it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I was
Now
wondering, because like it kind of went radio silent for a little bit. I was like, okay.
Well, because I was signed on as a consultant, but really the last time they showed me anything was more than a year ago. I saw some initial writing and gave a lot of notes on some of the broad strokes that are made. It was like I gave level of notes. It's like the easy one is there's way too much talking. This script is way long, because where you say they sneak into the secret headquarters, that's a sequence. The sneaking in, the going slow, peering around walls and stuff like that. So all this talk you have is you're going to have to end up cutting all that anyway, because all this is going to be pulled out. So there was that kind of note. And then there was like basic notes where I went back and I said, okay, this is what you're doing at its core. I see a problem here. So, and then I never heard back from any of those notes. I assume they got passed on. The next thing I saw was a presentation of that creative team.
Okay.
That it was a practice pitch for a more important pitch they were going to have. So that was the first time I saw stuff. And again, I've said in the past that I'm happy that I didn't have the guys who did the Chippendale short subjects leaning over me while I was working on Rescue Rangers, telling me like, no, it's got to be Donald Duck. And they don't wear clothes, I didn't have to do that. So if I'm called into a project, I try to understand what the people are doing and then at least point out, well, here was the heart of the series, and then they can change it, redesign characters or whatever. I mean, the DuckTales guys, 2017, they understood Darkwing. I mean, they were all huge. Frank Angonis, huge Darkwing fan, was Darkwing for several Halloweens, and got out of doing a book report at school by doing a report on Darkwing Duck. Anyway, so that was the last I heard. And then I'd say 4 months ago or something, I got a phone call from Bob Schooley of the Bob Schooley, Mark McCorkle team, who created Kim Possible and Penguins of Madagascar and have done several shows since then, and wrote the movie Sky High, I think, or at least a couple of the writers on that. Bob says, hey, we just heard that the writer's room of Darkwing Duck was disbanded and that the showrunner was taken off. And my response was, there was a writer's room? I didn't know it had progressed to that point, because that suggests, you're doing several episodes.
Right.
So I don't know where it is now. I will say that it's being developed by Point Grey Pictures. That's the company that Seth Rogen is part of, one of the head guys. And what he did with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I thought was fantastic with Mutant Mayhem. It was like, and there it was, you always look for, why am I doing a reboot? What's the new story I'm telling? Or what's the main thing? For all those Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle series and movies, you always had the merchandising. They were huge merchandising things. So you didn't need much more than that. You could let the creative team just go where they wanted and just say, what are the basics? Whereas what Point Grey did is they said, what if we make the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles teenagers? And they actually cast them as teenagers, made them less cool, less straight adventure. And I just watched the trailer yesterday of their upcoming, I'm sure you'll see it at San Diego Comic-Con, of the new show that they have coming out. I guess it's a 1-season series or whatever.
It's like, Tales of the
and it's animated, but so again, and I love the style of the movie. So man, they did such a great job of that. It's like the same guys are developing Darkwing or at least hiring people to develop it. So as long as it's them, I trust that they'll hit pay dirt. So there's no update on
Yeah.
timing or anything like that. So
Well, I mean, that's definitely a step in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. I think, if anybody could get it done, I would imagine
yeah,
it would be just based on track record alone. I imagine Seth Rogen and company can get it done. I have
yeah,
faith. I have faith in them on that much. So I mean that's
yeah.
actually I
I
think
mean,
that's
I got
pretty
to say,
positive.
the first pitch I saw really created a whole different kind of thing. I mean, even though it supposedly picked up from where the series ended, they
Mhm.
then took it a whole different direction and all sorts of stuff. Um, Whereas to me, it's kind of like you're doing a Superman movie. I don't need to see him leave Krypton again. I
Nah.
don't need to see Bruce
No.
Wayne's parents die and the pearls fall down. You want to do a flashback somewhere
Yeah.
in episode 3? Great. Knock
Yeah.
yourself out.
Yeah. I've seen
But
Uncle
it's
Ben
just
die
like,
enough.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Responsibility, responsibility.
Yeah.
Um, but to me, it's again like a Silver Age comic. You can just I get it. It's like, what's this show? Oh,
Mhm.
it's a duck on a motorcycle. Oh wow, they're chasing this electrical guy, and who's that little girl, and why is she leaping off the building to land next to him? It's just like you don't need an explanation,
Mm,
of a lot. I mean, we didn't explain half the thing.
mm.
Darkwing, Drake Mallard never had a job. And that
Yeah.
literally comes from when I was a kid. There was a show on called Ozzie and Harriet. And
Mm.
Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, their son Ricky, went on to become a rock star, or at least pop star. Um, they never explained Ozzie's job. He was just there. He just would come home and it's like, oh, hi, honey, how was work? Oh, it was great. That was about it. And it
Well,
was just like, I don't want to spend time at his work. Why would
yeah.
I worry about what kind of job? I don't need, I have Goslyn right at the heart of the show, creating problems and obstacles for him. I don't need the idea that I have to sneak out of the Daily Planet with nobody looking, and that's a complication to me saving beer. Um, so I mean, to me, I would just say, who's my crack team? Let's do Darkwing. We're gonna, just like Dynamite Comics made subtle little changes. Like in Dynamite, our show was all about Darkwing's ego. Almost every episode was about him getting out of his own way. I
Mhm.
would always, not that we followed it religiously, but the formula we kind of had is, for the first 2 acts, Darkwing's got some flaw that he's not facing up to or he's not dealing with. And then when he figures that out, the anvils start falling on the bad guys instead of on him.
Yeah.
Is that kind of karmic kind of thing that we did. And to me, that's, man, just start, if you come up again, I'm looking at that turtle movie, if you came up with a style like that, that's just cool, which kind of echoes in a different way, but
Mhm.
the cool Spider-Verse, that they did at Sony, that, you know, that's such a cool look. Just putting, and again, I have no idea if the decision is 2D or 3D, but just putting
Mhm.
Darkwing in CG, that's kind of enough of a hook to say, oh, what are they doing with them? And just make the adventure more adventurous and
Yeah.
make the comedy hilarious, and that it'll succeed on its own. You don't need the important story to bring back the character in this case, because it's not about continuity.
Right. Which I think it played that definitely plays to that plays the Darkwing strength 100%. I feel like you should
Yeah.
just be able to just I feel like you should just be able to dive right in. You
Yeah.
shouldn't have to take like a 50-page quiz and a
Yeah. And
or anything to be
I
able to
mean,
enjoy Darkwing Duck. It's like that's the fun of it.
when and this takes away from the whole faith in Seth Rogen thing, but
Mhm.
in his version of the Green Hornet, and also,
Mm.
I don't know if it was literally the last one, that version of the Lone Ranger when Johnny Depp was Tonto.
Oh
Um,
yeah, 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 yeah,
they
yeah.
Both those movies took so much time to to making the character into the guy we wanted to watch. So it's like for the most of the movie, I'm seeing somebody deny their heroism or what, and then finally it clicks, and that's where I want to start. You know, I don't need the Dark Night of the Soul to find out why I'm going to put on a mask or that. You know, not for this light of show.
No.
You know, you can just like we had that Goslyn Darkwing, you know, emotional connection. That's enough at the heart of it. You don't have to do a movie where he's fighting being a father, you know, or something.
No.
Because any of that stuff you wanted to throw into an episode, you can.
Yeah.
It's like, what if he dated somebody other than Morgana? You know,
I mean, these are all
or
things.
you know, he gets smitten with, you know, a different superpowered female, and you know, Morgana is not gonna. He's caught in the middle between two superpower things. So, I mean, that's great for an episode, and you could even play that within some story that you're going to tell over X many an episode arc. Darkwing was not Gargoyles. Gargoyles is the opposite. Gargoyles is, man, you can't miss an episode.
No.
Wait, I got to go back and see that. You know, hence,
no.
it's rabid fandom, and Greg Wiseman was our executive on Darkwing. I mean, he was fairly new to the department, but I mean, Greg was an editor, assistant editor at DC Comics,
right?
So, and he knew all the Silver Age stuff, so he could come in and help us with stuff, and you know, he knew, you know, what he could bring up, and he was never lost in that, you know, kind of stuff. So, he was a huge hit. But I mean, his feeling, I mean, on Gargoyles, I'm not sure there's been more than a half dozen Gargoyle comics that weren't written by Greg. So
I was gonna say, I honestly, I think there was like one run, a brief one.
Somebody brought up one because I thought there was none, and somebody said, well, there was actually whatever the one was.
I want to say it might have even been at Marvel where this one comes from, because I know they did have Marvel comics for a little bit. But to my recollection, it pretty much very little in regards to Gargoyles I have ever consumed. Very little of it was devoid of of Greg Weisman's touch. So, which I think is which I guess that kind of brings me to this. Is there any chance that we see you tackle any maybe like future Darkwing Duck related things?
I did at least one comic story with James Silvani, and it's collected actually, and I don't know if people have seen this thing, the part of that Disney 100 Years of Disney. My story, which way am I going there?
Yeah, there you go.
My story is actually included in this. And James is a good friend, so I mean, I know all the stuff that he's, you know, puts in the background and stuff like that. And that was a lot of fun. It was a time travel story with a paradox, and my goal was to, and again, this is me, like my favorite Darkwing episodes, playing with the medium, but I said, I want page, I forgot what it was, like page 3 to be the exact page, as close as you can make it to page 7. And basically, there's a time travel story that Darkwing dies in page 3, and Goslyn has this adventure to basically save him by page 7. So the same thing plays out, except the ending is different. And it's, you know, that was kind of a fun thing. I love Will Eisner's Spirit, especially when he was doing all those random non-Spirit stories that Spirit was just tangential to. So, I mean, who knows? I don't think it's been announced, but I will have a part in a future Darkwing series, but I won't be writing any. So would I? It's like, I don't know. Do I need comics fandom telling me I'm doing my character wrong? I don't know that I need that. So.
Well, I don't know if you know. Well, I don't know if you know this, Tad, but you as the writer, creator, the mind behind the thing, you have no idea the character the way the fans do. I don't know if you know this or not.
Yeah,
It's
they're the experts. Yeah.
It's always a funny thing to me. I always find it hilarious when I see people tell writers and creatives that they don't know their
No,
creations.
I'd tell you, I'd love to, and I always be open if if they say, "Hey, we're going to do another Negaduck run, or we're going to do this Morgana series, and we're doing this." And if Marvel, I don't know if Marvel still does it. They used to have those yearly meets where everybody would come to town.
Oh,
and
yeah.
everybody would pitch their stories and what's the
Mhm.
big event, and
They still do them,
basically
as far as I know.
guys sitting there saying like, okay, how are you going to screw up my run by making me give everything a red sky, or whatever it is. I would love if they said, hey, here's a bunch of writers, and to listen to the writers kind of pitch their thing and just
Okay.
brainstorm again. They're saying, this is what I'm thinking of doing, and saying, well, what if you did this, and what if you did it, and I'm always of the feeling of, go ahead and ignore what I'm saying. I'm just having fun giving it.
Yeah.
And it may be that I give them an idea that they're very excited with. They go back and they say, oh, it doesn't really work, but oh wait, what if I did this? And it sparks them into a new area. That would be fun. In other words,
Yeah.
I would love to be part of it without actually doing the work. So
Hey, I respect it.
Me in a nutshell. Yeah.
Well, I guess before we get out of here, I do want to remind everyone that by the time this goes up, you will still have, I think there are 11 days now. By the time this goes up, you should have at the very least 9 to maybe 10 days, give or take, depending on how fast I turn this around. To get
be
on
very
that
fast. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Be very fast.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and be as fast as the Flash on this one.
There you go.
Which I don't think it'll be difficult to do, but you guys will have a lot. You'll still have like a full week and some change to really get out there, go run to your Kickstarter, go pick this up. This Kickstarter, if I remember correctly, you're gonna be able to get a complete collection. There's gonna be 3 different volumes of Darkwing Duck. You can back it at multiple different tiers, but I think you can even get like different books individual of each other, or get the full complete set.
And I think they've passed some of their benchmarks, which I think no matter what tier you're at, you get an ash can. I guess it was announced because the ash can is basically a preview of the next Darkwing series, and I did the cover for that.
Oh,
I'm signing a bunch of stuff. My poor hand.
So make it worth Tad's while. So make sure y'all go and do this, because he didn't
make
sign
it worth
all those
my
for nothing.
claw.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing I was gonna say too, I think there's even like some different there's like all kinds of like awesome stuff with this.
There's original art, there's like sketch covers, there's some like really cool collectible stuff. So.
Yeah, no, this is actually pretty well. I didn't even realize how many of these 8 actually like passed by this point. And you can also get like,
I think 300,000 if they hit that. We're almost there. That's the next big thing. So
which that's just insane to me that like I love to see it.
Yeah.
But
me too. I got to read those final issues.
See,
I missed.
It's like, hey,
that's how they're getting me to do. That's how they're getting me to do all these interviews. It's like, well, we could send them to you digitally, or you could have a set of these. Just have to do a few more interviews.
I don't know why.
5 more podcasts. And your right hand.
I don't know why I felt like there was
going on.
I got this impression that like it was like a phone call where like someone's got like a modulated voice and they're like, if you want to see the remaining issues. Like, I don't
pretty much, yeah. I tell you, I'm really looking forward to those Justice Ducks. I'm saying so many nice things. It's like, what if you do something different? I should see all that so I can talk about them honestly.
Well,
all right. Well, this has been great. And yes, everybody should go out and hit that Kickstarter. because of course you'll be working all night. It'll go up tomorrow morning.
Oh yeah.
You know, so you have plenty of time to jump in there and support these guys. I think, you know what, we're living in a different world as far as publishing and getting those things you want to see actually in the stores and things like that. And this Kickstarter model is, which, speaking of Greg Wiseman, they did a fantastic Gargoyles thing, which hit, I believe, 1 million or just shy of 1 million.
Somewhere in there. Yeah.
I'm not going to hear the end of that with Greg Wiseman. So. Like, you know, Tad, a little more continuity could have gotten you over the line. Yeah.
Well, you know what? We'll let Greg have his continuity.
And his million people.
Well,
and all the hardcovers and the embossing and the cool case that came with it, dude.
Oh, I was actually really sad
with Darkwing.
Yeah, well, I was happy I got to catch this one. I missed the Gargoyles one, so I'm actually excited for this one because I actually get to get it. So,
all right, mine too. They're small.
Yeah. Well, I just appreciate you taking the time and hanging out with me.
Fun. I can tell everybody if they want me at the local convention, convince the convention to invite me. Otherwise, I'm going to be stuck in this little room.
You guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.